Member for Lambton Kent Middlesex.
I want to thank you, Speaker, for this opportunity to talk about one of the historic agreements that Canada has embarked upon and in what it means in terms of the creation of jobs and prosperity, not only for the individuals and Canadian businesses, but for individuals and their families as well. Which gives that I'm pleased to rise and talk about the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement and the effects that it will have on our economy. My riding is Lambton Kent Middlesex in southwestern Ontario. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to focus a little more likely on the particular area of southwestern Ontario, but in Ontario in general, where the Ontario's export to South Korea were an average of about $516 million. When this agreement comes into force, Ontario's key exporters and providers will see a significant amount of new opportunities. Exporters to South Korea will benefit from not only markets that are opening, but in terms of non-tariff provisions also. These provisions will ease regulatory barriers, they reinforce intellectual property rights, and they make open, transparent rules of market access. Mr. Speaker, today colleagues will be speaking, and from what I would understand, we're going to see a consent to support this agreement, which is good to see. I want to also pay my comments and my appreciation to the Minister of International Trade, who spends so much time not only traveling but spending time with his colleagues across the world, in this case with South Korea, to make an agreement like this come in place. Also, a little while ago, you heard the Parliamentary Secretary to International Trade speak. Not only did he speak in depth about the trade and the and the benefits that will be seen not only by Canada but also the reciprocal benefits that South Korea will see, but also his compassion that comes with the history of why Canada and South Korea were able to come and make such a strong agreement that gives Canada such, in some cases, quite honestly, preferential treatment. It is clear that we talked about the Korean War and the effects of Canadians on that, and it was because of our government wanting to recognize that significant conflict that these tributes have been made across Canada to recognize our veterans who died and in that conflict. Mr. Speaker, this agreement will not only improve market access, but it will also look at the interests of Ontario in many areas. I mean, we think about agriculture, we think about minerals, and we think about metals, but I think maybe in many cases we don't think about aerospace, medical devices, clean technology, and we are a leader in that environmental aspect of clean technology, food manufacturing, information, communications technology, life sciences, Mr. Speaker. Canada and Ontario are leaders in these areas. It will also improve access to professional services, with Ontario with greater and more predictable access to a diverse South Korean market. Mr. Speaker, the agreement will provide predictable and non-discriminatory rules for our investors and ensure that investments benefit from greater protection in the South Korean market. Suppliers from Ontario will also benefit from preferential access to procurement by South Korea central government agencies for contracts that are valued above $100,000. And so there are going to be strong provisions in this agreement, and there on non-tariff measures. And Mr. Speaker, that's a critical point. When we talk about developing trade agreements, that we talk about non-tariff measures in terms of effective dispute settlement provisions. and has been talked about earlier, particularly by the Parliamentary Secretary, about the benefits that Canada has in terms of those dispute settlement provisions that have been put into this agreement that will give strong reference to Canada should those issues ever arise. One of the things that is important is that we often look at how does that work with Canada in relationship to the example Europe and the United States, and we'll talk a little bit about that because what we've got is basically a stronger agreement with South Korea than either the Europe or the United States have. Not in all, but they're comparable, and in some areas we got preferred. So let's just talk a little bit about the industrial goods sector, which accounts, let's just speak, for about 12% of Ontario's GDP. It affects, we have about 525,000 workers in Ontario that benefit because of our industrial sector. Once this agreement is in place, 95% of those tariffs on industrial products, they immediately go away. And so this is going to make a huge benefit to Ontario and to the industrial sector, not like in the United States where it goes from 3 to 5 or 10 years. Ours will immediately go, the majority of those, right at the start. In terms of the Canadian manufacturers and exporters, I think most of us in this House recognize the name of Jason Myers, who's a representative of that. And he says, Canada's free trade agreement with South Korea will be the first step in gaining more open access for Canadian exports. This agreement should make Canada an even more attractive destination for investors and manufacturers, create jobs and opportunities for Canadians, and level the playing field for Canadian businesses, making them more competitive on the global stage. I want to also touch a little bit, as others have, on the automotive sector, which will benefit from this agreement. And it looks at our auto industry, looking at going beyond the traditional North American markets and reaching out into South Korea and actually providing a level playing field for competition for our auto industry providers. And in fact, in terms of the EU and the United States, Canada did, in this particular case, get some preferential treatment in terms of this agreement over those two, particularly around the accelerated dispute settlement, in which our agreement with Canada and the South Korea government will be an expedited dispute settlement agreement provision, I should say, over that of the United States, and more quickly than obviously in the EU. But I do want to get to an area that's close to my heart, Mr. Speaker, and that is agriculture, and certainly the processing part in agriculture also. As we know, agriculture and food processing industry is a significant driver in Ontario, with some $44 billion in GDP that is generated from that industry and that industry alone. Almost a third of it, of that GDP of $44 billion, comes from agriculture and the food processing area. As well, the total agri-food system, which includes primary agriculture, processing, food services, retail, wholesale, account for almost 12% of the jobs in Ontario. And so since the implementation of the Korea's free trade agreements with the U.S. and EU, Mr. Speaker, Canada's share has dropped significantly. And the other reason of why this agreement is so significant to get into place now. This agreement will eliminate tariffs in whole or in part in 86% of the current agriculture exports. This duty-free access will give Canadian products, particularly beef and pork, preferential access to the South Korean market. We know that there's other products in Ontario, and those are great wines, which will move away that 15% tariff on something that is very unique, and that is our ice wine. and also the products that we sell, Canadian rye whiskey, which carries a 20% tariff, Mr. Speaker, that will disappear, and I know the Spirits Canada have been very supportive of that. So with this, Mr. Speaker, I would just wrap up and say we've just finished and we're looking forward to getting this thing signed by January of this year, because it is not only good for Canadians in whole, but it is good for Ontario and Lambton-Kent Middlesex. Thank you very much.
Question et commentaire, l'honorable député de Louis Hébert.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie mon collègue pour son discours. Comme vous le savez, le NPD va appuyer cet accord, non pas parce que c'est un accord de libre-échange, mais parce qu'on pense que raisonnablement, ça vaut la peine de l'appuyer. Maintenant, évidemment, il y a des choses qui nous agacent un petit peu. Hein, aucun accord n'est parfait. Puis là, j'aimerais entendre mon collègue là-dessus. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a un mécanisme de règlement entre les compagnies privées et l'État. Est-ce que mon collègue peut me dire s'il est confortable avec l'idée qu'on puisse partiellement limiter ce qu'un État peut faire, son gouvernement peut faire, à cause des mécanismes de réglementation de différents? Est-ce qu'une entreprise privée peut avoir le dessus sur son propre gouvernement? Est-ce qu'il peut l'empêcher de faire ce qu'il veut? Voilà.
The honourable member for Lambton-Kent Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague. I had a little trouble, actually, to be honest with you, with some of the translation, and so I apologize with that. And so I don't know. I don't want to answer wrongly. And I'm wondering, Mr. Speaker, if you could just give a summary of that, and maybe I could pick up the translation a little better. Maybe it's in my hearing piece. I'm not sure.
Question et commentaire, questions and comments. The honourable member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for Lambton-Kent Middlesex for his speech. I'm very troubled by this deal. I don't know if the Green Party is going to be alone in opposing it. Maybe the Bloc Québécois will join us and we'll have a mighty force of four. But it occurs to me that this deal is not going to be in Canada's best interest. And I say that both because I'm concerned about the investor-state provisions and because of the history of Korea's very robust economic policy and its success in continuing to expand the trade deficit that the EU and the US were experiencing, even after the EU and US concluded deals with Korea. Korea's manufacture of high-value exports, particularly cars, and the very, frankly, brilliant but difficult for competitors trade strategy of the government of Korea working so strongly with its private sector leaves us in a situation where we can see on the record that neither the U.S. nor the EU was able to close the gap on trade deficits with Korea after signing a deal. In fact, those gaps widened. Can the honourable member tell me why he thinks Canada will be any different?
The honourable member for Lambton-Kent Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And an interesting question, because the honourable member touched on the auto industry. When the United States, and actually, in fact, when Europe signed an agreement with South Korea, their exports to South Korea doubled. And so in terms of the auto industry, remembering where the majority of our products that would be that are going, our auto industry is supporting this initiative. Ford Canada, in fact, had the largest exports into South Korea last year in history. So we're looking to, when I look at groups, to my honourable member, for example, who are supporting this, these companies and individuals belong to chambers of commerce. Perrin Beatty, for example, will say I saw firsthand how Canadian companies were losing their footing in the market from other countries. Some were even making the difficult choice to shut down their marketing offices. A free trade agreement between Canada and South Korea will help our businesses and increase growth opportunities across the industry, ag, food, aerospace, infrastructure, energy, chemicals, and the list kind of goes on. But my point, to the honourable member is that we have a list of industries and companies and organizations that all support and say this gives Canada a great opportunity not only to expand its market but to expand its investment. Thank you very much.